Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Eriette of the Charmed Apple. So Eriette is a 3-mana Orzhov commander. She's a 2/4. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. And at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the number of auras you control. So mainly, we're going for a Stax strategy. We're going to look to disrupt our opponents from being able to do anything like cast multiple spells a turn or activate their creatures or whatever. We're going to load Eriette or just other creatures up with auras, and then we're going to lean on this life-draining ability to burn out all of our opponents. So with that said, we do have other cards like Campbell that add to that burn strategy. But let's just take a look at all of our auras. So we've got some cantrip auras, and these are here mainly just because they're auras that cantrip. So they count towards Eriette's number of auras on the field while cantripping, thus replacing themselves. So Delic Gift, Chosen by Heliod, Feather of Flight, Lithiform Blight, Rune of Mortality, Rune of Sustenance, and Scourge Mark. And in particular, it's important for our auras to enchant non-creatures as much as possible, which is why cards like Lithiform and the runes are available, because we can enchant things like lands, let's say. And then these auras are less susceptible to being killed by players casting sweepers or players casting removal spells or players just getting into combat with each other and attacking and blocking. Because one of the problems with Eriette is that, let's say you load up your opponent's creatures with auras. Well, they can still just attack each other even though they can't attack you, and can politic each other into just trading with their creatures so that those auras are not around anymore. Or even if they don't politic with each other, they can just attack each other, and then the defending player is incentivized to block and kill that creature anyway. So as many times as we can get auras that go on something else that's not a creature, the better. Which is also why something like Trespasser's Curse is in here. Even though Trespasser's Curse is not really that good of an aura, it's just another way that we can get an aura onto the field that's not enchanting a creature. Then we have a bunch of card draw, some of which also applies to our auras. In fact, most of which applies to our auras. So Core Spirit Dancer, Mesa Enchantress, Pearl Ear, SRAM. These are all cards that trigger off of auras. Sage's Reverie, another card that triggers off of auras. Lord Skitter's Blessing creates a Wicked Roll token, and that Wicked Roll token is an enchantment aura, so that counts. And then at the beginning of your end step, if you control an enchanted creature, you lose 1 and draw 1. Also, Underworld Connections is basically the aura version of Phyrexian Arena, although a little less useful since you do have to tap the land that it's enchanted to. Then we have Delny. Since Eriette is a 2-power creature, this will double the Eriette life-draining trigger. We're going to have a bunch of lands, 35, more than the normal around 30 that I play in decks, because we do want to be able to play more, since we're not going to have too much ramp in this Stax deck, since a lot of it gets countered by our various Stax pieces, which we will get to. This also means that I'm playing a lot of pretty suboptimal lands that I normally wouldn't run, things like Fetid Heath, for example. Filter lands are normally terrible, but we don't have too many options. Once we get past, 30, 31 lands, we do have to stretch and start playing some other stuff. Also, Sarah's Sanctum, Gaia's Cradle for enchantments, since we are playing a whole bunch of enchantments. We have Sheltered by Ghosts as a removal spell that also doubles as a permanent, and it's a little bit of a protection since it will give Ward 2 to Eriette. Then we have our protection. So these are basically cards that protect Eriette. So like Giver of Runes, Mother of Runes, Grand Abolisher, make sure the Eriette doesn't get killed by removal, doesn't get countered. And Dog Umbra is a 2-fold card. It's either a pacifism effect if we put it on an opposing creature, or if we put it on our own creature, such as Eriette, we get Totem Armor. Guard Mage's Rescue is also a way of temporarily getting hexproof, but then it sticks around as an aura, so it counts towards that total aura count. We have a little bit of fast mana from Chrome and Mox Diamond. We have Transcendent Envoy to make our aura spells cheaper, and we have Replenish. So let's say that our opponents do sweep the board and blow up all the enchantments. Well, this is a way to just quickly get them all back later in the game. And then importantly, our enormous suite of pacifism and pacifism adjacent effects. So cards like Bonds of Faith, Chains of Custody, Cooped Up, there's a lot of them. They basically do some variation of your opponent's creature can't attack, the enchanted creature can't activate its abilities, or sometimes in the case of something like Chains of Custody, just straight up exile, or Darksteel Mutation and Reprobation, strip all the abilities off of things, which is important on enemy commanders. Basically, as many sort of like pacifism and similar effects as we can get. We want to be able to deploy auras, and we don't want to just load them all up onto Eriette to make her a Voltron commander. We can put these on opposing creatures, and it's especially important for the creature to not be able to attack. So again, as previously mentioned, we don't want our opponents to be able to attack each other and, block and trade in combat. So not being able to attack, huge part of these auras. Then we've got all of our various Stax cards. So these are cards like Archon of Emeria to rule of law our opponents so they can't cast multiple spells, Drawn Inland Vala to shut off activated abilities, Hushbringer and Doorkeeper Thrall to shut off ETB triggers, Stony Silence to shut off artifacts being activated. Just as much of this stuff as we can slow our opponents down with. Or if you're not personally a fan of Stax, or your playgroup isn't a fan of Stax, there's really no way of getting around this. You could cut all of these cards, but then the deck would be significantly worse. Your plan is to very slowly drain life out of your opponents over the course of many turns, and if you're not running these Stax effects, then your opponents are just going to bury you in card advantage, or just kill Eriette, or sweep the board, or do any number of other things that these Stax cards are keeping in check. A little bit of tutoring, and then some other auras that didn't neatly fit into the previous category. So Spellbook Vendor is at the beginning of combat, you can pay 1, and when you do, create a Sorcerer Roll token attached to a creature. The Sorcerer Roll token itself is not really important. The important part is that you can keep putting aura tokens onto creatures. And then we've got Contaminated Ground and Evil Presence, which are auras that enchant lands and turn them into swamps. And importantly, not swamps in addition to whatever else they're doing, but just swamps, period. So these are ways that you can turn an opponent's, say, Gaia's Cradle or Nykthos or other important land into just a plain old swamp. But normally this wouldn't be good enough. They're really here just because they also happen to be auras that enchant something that isn't a creature. But with all that said, that is going to do it for Eriette of the Charmed Apple in EDH.